Hi, this is Richard Chamberlain with the Chamberlain Law Group in Perrysburg, Ohio. Today we're going to talk about the different types of probate proceedings that there are here in Ohio. Now, when a client comes to us and a loved one has recently passed away, we talk about how we need to go about administering the estate, and we take a look at the assets and how they were owned. If there were assets that were in the decedent's name and there aren't any beneficiary designations on those assets, there weren't any joint owners, then we need to take those assets through probate. One of the first questions we need to ask is, what kind of a probate proceeding do we need to have? The main type of probate proceeding is called a full administration, but there are two exceptions to that that you can qualify for if you have a certain amount of assets that need to be probated. So let's talk first of all about the full administration, and then we'll talk about those two exceptions. The full administration process is what people typically think of when they think about probate, where we start out with notice to all of the heirs and beneficiaries that we've started this probate. We give them an opportunity to be heard about a will if there's a will. Then we file an inventory, which is a detailed listing of the assets and their values with appraisals if the assets need to be appraised. There's a hearing on that inventory. People have an opportunity to object to the valuation or the assets that are listed. Once all the bills have been paid and the assets distributed, then we have an accounting that we need to file, which is a listing of where all the assets of the estate went, who got what. And then there's a hearing on that accounting. Again, people have an opportunity to be heard and object. And then once that's finally approved, the estate is over. That process takes 6 months to a year generally, depending on the type of assets that there are and a lot of other factors in the estate. But it takes quite a long time. So if an estate will qualify for one of the exceptions, then we would certainly prefer to have those available to us. So let's talk about what those are. The first kind of a probate proceeding that's not a full administration is a relief from administration. And that's available to an estate that has assets of $100,000 or less if the surviving spouse is the sole beneficiary. Or if the spouse is not the sole beneficiary, then the assets have to be $35,000 or less. So if you have assets in the estate that are under that threshold, then you would qualify for the relief from administration. And that process takes typically a month or two, depending on the type of assets. We file an application to relieve the estate from administration. We give a listing of the assets and their values, a listing of the debts of the estate, and then we ask the court for an order for those assets to be either sold or distributed and the bills paid if there are bills that need to be paid. Then once that's done, we give a report to the court that those things have been done and the estate's closed. So like I said, probably a month or 2 months. The last kind of probate proceeding that can be used, it's not used very often, but it's used for very small estates, and that is called a summary release. And that is available if the assets are generally less than $5,000. And specifically, it's available for someone who either has paid or has obligated themselves to pay the funeral and burial expenses, and if the assets that need to go through probate are the lesser of $5,000 or the amount of funeral and burial expenses. So if you have an estate, it's got $2,000 in it, somebody paid the funeral and burial expenses and those expenses were $4,000, then they can use the summary release proceeding to have those $2,000 from the probate estate transferred to them to reimburse them for those funeral expenses that they paid. And typically that summary release process takes just a couple of weeks maybe for the preparing of the papers and the filing and processing of everything. So much, much faster, much more efficient. So those are the three kinds of probate proceedings: the full administration, the relief from administration, and the summary release. If you have any questions about probate, how estates are handled, if you need any help with a probate proceeding, then we invite you to give us a call here at our office. We'd be glad to talk to you about it. Hope this has been helpful for you, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.